This project is to create a rainbow eye, and the first supplies you'll need is your paper, your pencil, and a couple of different circle shapes that you will use to trace with. I have one large and a couple small. First, I'm going to make a curve from the left-hand side of my paper over to the right-hand side of my paper. And then from that line, I'm going to curve down, and I'm almost going to reach where my first line started, but I'm going to leave a little space. Next, I'm going to make a letter J, or almost a Nike check type curve, to make the inner corner of my eye. For the waterline, or the bottom part of the eye, I'm going to make a curve that kind of follows along my other curve, but it's just a little higher up. Next, I'm going to make a curve for the inner corner. Now I'm ready for my tracing circles. I placed this one for my iris. This circle is probably a little too big, so I would suggest one that's a little smaller, but this worked out okay for my iris. For the pupil, I'm going to check my two smaller circles and see which one will be the right size. That one's a little big. This one worked out just fine. So I'm going to trace that carefully with my pencil until I have the circle that I want for my pupil. Now lightly with my pencil, I'm going to add some highlights. I'm going to do some circle highlights. You could do some rectangles, a triangle type shape. Any of those will work for some highlights. But I just would add 2 or 3 highlights onto your eye. And then if there's any lines inside your highlights, you will want to erase those as well. For the upper lid, I'm going to do a curve that follows along the top of my eye shape, but with a little space in between. And then I'm going to take a Sharpie marker and I'm going to trace just the outer part of my eye shape. And I'm not going to worry about doing the waterline or the inner corner line, just the very outside shape of my eye. I'm also going to trace my pupil, which is the black part of your eye. And I'm going carefully around my highlights. I don't want those to be black. I want those to be bright white, so I don't want to trace around those either. If you could color the whole thing in with your Sharpie, but I'm going to use an Expo marker just because the tip is a little wider and it'll be a lot faster to color in that way. An Expo marker or a Sharpie would work fine to color in any areas you want black, like your pupil. One thing that I forgot to add were my eyelashes. You could do eyelashes or you could leave them alone. A tip that I have for eyelashes is the eyelashes right above your pupil will go straight up and down. The ones to the left will curve to the left, and the ones to the right will curve to the right. You can kind of see that on my top lashes. And I'm just filling in any empty space where I need to. And I'll show you again on the bottom. Ones on the left side will curve to the left. Ones directly underneath my pupil will curve down. And then the ones on the right side will curve down to the right. And then I traced over these lines as best I could. I added in some other lines if I needed to with my Sharpie. So I'm tracing over all my eyelashes with my Sharpie. Now we're ready for shading. The first area I'm going to shade is my eyelid above my top row of eyelashes. And first I'm going to make a dark line where I drew my eyelid line. And then I'm going to slowly blend a shadow down towards my lash line. And it starts really dark where my lid line is. And as it comes down towards my lash line, it gets lighter and lighter and lighter. And I'm going to repeat this over my entire lid line coming down to the lash line. So that top curve slowly blending down to the bottom curve where you have your lashes. In the inner corner, there's some little highlights because the inner corner is very wet. So I just have some little areas of shading, almost like stripes, if you will, to show where the areas are lighter and where the areas are darker. Now on the whites of your eye, there are some small shadows, so I wouldn't make these too dark or else your eyes will look gray instead of white. So right underneath your lashes, you'll have a little bit of a shadow, and then also right by your inner corner, there will be a little shadow there too. To blend your pencil, if you find that your pencil lines are a little scribbly and you want it to be smoother, I like using a Q-tip. You can also use your finger or a paper towel to blend these out. Sometimes when you're blending, the pencil lines might look a little darker, so just keep that in mind when you are blending your shading. And I have plenty of Q-tips, so if it ever gets too dirty, just let me know and I can get you a new one. So now I'm just taking that Q-tip and blending all over. You will also have a shadow on your waterline. This is very light, and I don't want to make it too dark or else it'll look like I have some really dark eyeliner. If you like that look, you could go for it, but I'm going to keep this very light. And just like before, I'm blending with my Q-tip to make my blends much smoother and not as scribbly or scratchy with my pencil. Also blending in the inner corner just to make those a little smoother. And then I'm going to repeat doing a shadow under my lash line and blending that out. I'm also going to do a shadow underneath my lash line. And this is the same as what we did above the lash line before, starting dark where it's right next to the eye, and then it gets lighter as it goes out. The great thing with pencil is you can also always clean it up with an eraser. So if your Q-tip kind of gets out of place or your areas are a little too dark, you can always erase it and clean that up. Now we are ready for watercolor. I'm going to start with my red, the beginning of the rainbow. I'm dipping my brush in my water and then swirling it in the red paint to get it wet and ready to paint. I'm going to just paint one small section of my eye red. I'm starting in the top left part of my eye, but you could start pretty much anywhere you would like. And I'm being very careful that I don't go outside of my pupil or go into any of my highlights. Once I have the red all done, I'm going to go to my next color, which is orange, wet the paints, and then go onto my paper. And I want this puddle that I'm putting on my paper, this section of orange, to be as solid as I can. Some areas are a little patchy, so I'm just going to go in with a little bit more orange in some of those areas to smooth it out. Next, on my side section of my paint palette, that's where you can mix up new colors. So I'm going to mix a red-orange, first going into the red, then rinsing off my brush and going into the orange, and then mixing those two colors together. Now I'm going to mix my red with my orange. Just where those two colors are about to touch, that's where I'm going to put my red-orange. So I can have a smooth transition from red to red-orange to orange. Now I'm going to repeat the same thing with my yellow. I'm going to put the yellow next to the orange, but make sure to leave a little bit of a space between your orange and your yellow. Trying to make that as smooth as possible and staying inside of my lines. Now I'm going to mix up my yellow-orange, the color in between orange and yellow. So mix a little yellow, mix a little bit of orange, and then right in that empty space that I left between those two colors is where I'm going to put my yellow-orange. Now if I need to mix a little bit more, I can dry off my brush or I can use a tiny little bit of water and just blend right where my yellow is touching my orange. Now I'm going to repeat this with the green, putting the green down with a little space in between my green and my yellow, making it as smooth as possible, mixing up a yellow-green, making sure to clean my brush in between colors, and then putting that yellow-green in that empty space. If I need to, I can blend with a wet brush. Now I'm making a blue section. And each section should be across from its complementary color. So the red should be right across from the green, the orange right across from the yellow, or the orange right across from the blue, excuse me, and the yellow right across from the purple. Now I'm mixing up my blue-green to go in that empty space. And that will blend the green into the blue. And right now my paper is getting really wet. That is okay. I have some puddles on my paper. We will fix that later. So right now I just want to get the colors down while the paints are wet and easily blendable. I don't want to try to clean up every puddle as I go. Now I'm doing the purple section. And I'm cleaning off my tray so that way I have room for my next mixed up colors. And you can use a baby wipe or a paper towel, whatever you have at your disposal to wipe down your tray. Mixing my blue, mixing my purple to make my blue violet or blue purple, whatever you want to call it, or indigo. You can also call it indigo. And blending those two colors together. You get the idea. And now I'm mixing my red violet or my red purple, also call it magenta, and carefully filling in that last empty space in between my red and my purple. And the last step is just, if you have any areas, you're just going to want to take a paper towel and dab. Yes, that's right, dab. Carefully dab with your paper towel and get any big puddles of paint where it's mixing and you don't really want it to mix. And let's make some more.